Welcome to My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 255. We are literally closing in the last days of the second Adar of this leap year and about to enter the month of Nissan, which will be next Shabbos, Chodesh Nissan, Chodesh HaGeula, the month of our redemption. So we will talk about the timely period in which we are in now, its relevance to our lives, its application to our personal day-to-day experiences. This program, I'm pleased to dedicate to my dear brother. Happy birthday on his 56th birthday, Baruch Shalom Jacobson. May he have a shnas hatzlacha together with his family and much nachas, children and grandchildren, together with his wife Leah, and all extended family. Since we're making announcements, those of you familiar with this program know that there's a rich store of archives of all previous programs that you can access at meaningfullife.com/mylife. You can also submit any question you like, completely anonymously, confidentially, at the forum at the same place, meaningfullife.com/mylife, as well as accessing the essays of the previous 4 years essay contest, My Life Chassidus Applied Essay Contest. And with that, we're about to close and finish the evaluation and the judging of this year's essays. Stay tuned for announcements about that as well. And finally, we survive on your support. Please consider dedicating a program, a series of programs in honor or memory of a loved one. Go to meaningfullife.com/sponsorship, where you can easily do that as well. So with that, let us go and let's begin perhaps with the most timely thing, and that is that tonight is Chafei Adar, Chafei Adar Beis, which of course is the birthday, the 118th birthday of the Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka, the Plag Gufa, the partner of the Rebbe, who was born on Chafei Adar Tofresh Samach Aleph, and this year will be the 118th birthday. So let's begin with that, and we don't have to look far to take out a directive and a personal application. The Rebbe himself provided to us that Tov Shemem Ches, the year of her passing, Chav Bei Shvat, which was almost a month, a little more than a month before her birthday, the Rebbe instituted on Chav Hei Adar the mitzvah called Yom Heledes. So in honor of his wife, in honor of the Rebbetzin, what more beautiful way to honor it by, even though the Rebbe had already spoken about people designating and celebrating their birthday in Hayom Yom of Yud Aleph Nissan, the Rebbe's own birthday, talks about a birthday and how one should honor it. But then it came a full-blown effort that people celebrate their birthday, and the Rebbe even said that though once upon a time it was not done publicly, but privately it was done, it was kept completely quiet. But now, since we're coming closer to the Gula and the end of Golus, we add a new thing to use something that's even used in the world, the honoring of a birthday, and that should be used for Kedusha and for holiness. And the Rebbe has all the details of how one celebrates a birthday in a meaningful way, making a farbrengen, taking gan achlotis, adding tzedakah, and a whole list of things that the Rebbe actually was published that period in Tov Shemem Ches, that year, 1988, to launch this mitzvah of Yom Heledes. When the Rebbe edited one of the ads in Yiddish about this campaign, the birthday campaign, the Rebbe wrote that this is the day that is the beginning of a person's being, a person's zayin, a person's metzias. And that is therefore a most important day, because everything else follows. If you don't exist, nothing else is there either. So the birthday signifies the existence of a human being, the fact that you were placed here and you were born. God chose you to come to this world. So it's not a small matter. It defines your entire mission. It defines your entire existence and your entire being. So there you have an application from Chafei Adar, the Rebbetzins birthday, as well as, according to one of the opinions, Rabbi Yeshua, it's also Rabbi Yeshua, Chafei Adar is also the day that the birthday of the universe. But Chafei Adar Nivra Elam. There's two opinions, Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lazar, whether it was the 25th of Elul or the 25th of Adar. 25th of Elul would make Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah. 25th of Adar would make Rosh Chodesh Nissan, the beginning, Rosh Hashanah. So the answer is that it's both. The Rebbe has a whole explanation. Tosfos says that in thought, the world was created on the 25th of Adar, and in action, it was created 25th of El. And then Api Kabbalah, the Arizal, and Chassidus, it's a whole discussion on this matter, the Primius and Chitzenius of the worlds. But bottom line is that also the 25th of El is also signified, excuse me, signified as a birthday of the universe. And we know Elam Kotten Zeh Adam, the universe, a macrocosm, is also a universe, a microcosm is the human being. And the Rebbetzin, embodying the Rebbe, and the Rebbetzin of our generation, the leader of our generation, Sihadeh, the seventh generation, embodies this macrocosmic birthday in her person, of her birthday, and through her, of course, everything else came, as the Rebbe himself said, that on Yudal Kislev, when he married the Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka, this is the day that bound me to you and you to me, because it was B'derech HaTeva, in natural ways, it was the Rebbetzin that gave the Rebbe, so to speak, his connection to the Frierdiker Rebbe, being his son-in-law. We also have a beautiful letter from a series of letters from the Frierdiker Rebbe to the Rebbe back in the Tafresh, early tzaddiks, I think Tzadik Beis or Tzadik Gimel, where I think I may have talked about it once, but it's just really, really nice. Where the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to the Rebbe, remember this is the Rebbe still, they're talking about they got married in Tafresh Peites, so we're talking about a few years after their marriage, they were already in Poland, and the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to the Rebbe, briefly he writes to him, I think this is in the summer of Pei Tzadik Gimel, or Tzadik Beis, that I'm sure you appreciate the special jewel, simateva, that you have, the special treasure that you have. And then, a few months later, Frierdiker Rebbe says, I see you did not comment on that, so I want to make sure that you do appreciate this special treasure. The Rebbe writes back to the Frierdiker Rebbe that he's not clear what the Frierdiker Rebbe means, which treasure. And then finally, on Chafei Adar, a few months later, from when the initial letter came out, and the second follow-up letter, Frierdiker Rebbe says, it's none other than my daughter, Chaya Mushka, that beautiful treasure. We have that letter, very personal, but also very revealing, very beautiful, revealing to us Frierdiker Rebbe's chfivus, of course, to his daughter, but also showing the Rebbe and focus and emphasizing to the Rebbe the connection. So just adds to the appreciation of Chafei Adar, which of course is the birthday of our Rebbetzin, and that birthday continues on even after Histalkus, as the Rebbe brings again and again from the Rebbe Rashab, and from Halacha and Nigla from the Ragachover, that the years are added even after Neshama leaves, the Neshama continues to grow, and that's why we continue saying the Kapitel Tilim, even though it's not a Neshama Beguf anymore, but the Neshama every year goes up another level, means each birthday adds another dimension to that soul's ascent in higher and higher levels. Okay. Let's talk then, Chassidus applied to Tazria, HaChodesh, and Rosh Chodesh Nissan, which all converge this coming Shabbos. This coming Shabbos is Parshas Tazria. It's Parshas HaChodesh, the extra chapter that we read from the four Parshas, as I mentioned last week. Shkolim, Zocher, Porah, and then HaChodesh is either Rosh Chodesh Nissan as it is this year, or Shabbos that blesses Nissan. And that's, of course, the chapter where Hashem tells Moshe, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. This is the new month of the new year, the lunar year, which is the beginning of the year in the lunar cycle, and the month when I will redeem, and we will take the Jews out of Mitzrayim. 15 days later, which would be Pesach. They all converge on this coming Shabbos. So let's talk a moment. What's common denominator, I think, jumps out at us immediately. All three things have the common denominator of redemption. Tazria. What does Tazria mean? Birth. Isha ki Tazria. V'yolda Zachar. When a woman will conceive and give birth to a Zachar, to a male. Tazria comes from the word zera, which is growth or birth and conception. Tazria, the ultimate zriya, when we plant something and we sow something, and what comes out of it is, of course, is the Geula itself. The Geula is the outgrowth of all the work that we've been doing throughout history, that we do, that ultimately blossoms into the redemption, the Geula Amitis Vashlema. And that's why it says, Isha Kisazriya refers to Isha Knesset Yisrael, each Jew and all Jews, who are Malchus, and when we do our effort, we do the Zriya, and Zriya refers to all the mitzvahs a person does and sows and plants the seeds. What does it give birth to? Zachar, Shir Zachar, Losad Lavi, it says that the first 9 songs were all Lashon Nekeva, Shira, a Lashon Nekeva female, and the Shir Zachar will be when Mashiach comes, a type of permanence. Zachar here referring to the strength and the permanence and eternity of the redemption. There you have in Tazria. Pashas HaChodesh, of course, is the beginning of the Geula of Mitzrayim, and Kimei Tzeis Chemeretz Mitzrayim Aren Neflos. The final redemption parallels and follows the redemption of Mitzrayim. Just as when the days when they left Mitzrayim, I will show you wonders in the future. And Chodesh HaGeula, that this is the month, B'Nissan Nigalu, B'Nissan Asidin Le'Goel. In the month of Nissan, we were redeemed. That was back over 3,300 years ago when we left Egypt, Mitzrayim. And B'Nissan Asidin Le'Goel, in Nissan we will in the future be redeemed, in the coming Geula Amitis Vashlema. And of course, Rosh Chodesh Nissan, the third item of next Shabbos, is the Rosh Chodesh itself, the Rosh, the head that concludes the entire month, of course, the redemption. So what's the message of redemption? When you ask the redemption, you right away want to know redeemed from what? People could understand if I was trapped or held hostage, God forbid, or in prison, or under oppression, either of Egypt or of the other oppressors, b'chol der v'der emdim aleinu l'chalaseinu, all the way to the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, in the last generation. So we could understand redeemed from oppression. But now we live in freedom. We are not oppressed. We can serve God as we see fit. We can send our children to any school. So where's the redemption from what? So as the Rebbeim explain, and the Rebbe especially in the Maimorim said after the 6-day war in Tavshin Chav, the end of Chav Zayin, the beginning of Tavshin Chav Ches, and the Pasuk V'hei Yitaka b'Shefer Gadol, Ubo ha'evdim eretz Ashur and edachem eretz Mitzrayim, that the Shefer Gadol will be heard. A great shofar will be, the sound of a great shofar will be heard. And what will it do? It will draw the Dachim, those who are pushed away in Eretz Mitzrayim, in Egypt, and those that are lost in Eretz Ashur. Ashur is Assyria. And what are these two levels? And they will come, Nishtachvis al Har Kodesh. They come to bow on the holy mountain, meaning Yerushalayim, HaChodesh, the holy mountain, Har HaBayis, Beis HaMikdash. The Dochem Beretz Mitzrayim, explains Chassidus, refers to the stages in Golus, in exile, when we were under oppression, poverty, impoverished, tortured, exiled. So we're pushed away. Nedachim is like pushed under, subjugated. Then there's another type of Golus. It's called Eretz Ashur. Ashur from the word Esher, with an aleph, prosperity, opulence, also connected to wealth. And there, it's even worse. It's Avdim, you get lost there. Because the apathy that comes from comfort zones, as with all the blessing that's in it, can also create a very deep Golus, where you think everything is fine. You don't even recognize there's a problem. In the Mitzrayim, you recognize there's a problem. You see an oppression. You see bondage. You see slavery. You see genocide, God forbid. So it's obvious that you cry out for help and you want to be redeemed from it. But when things seemingly are comfortable, we become apathetic, indifferent, complacent, gleichgültig, adishut in Hebrew. So that is Avdim. You can get lost in it, not just pushed away, because you become so lost you're not even aware. In the words of the Baal Shem Tov, Haster Aster Panai, there's a darkness, you know, so at least it's dark. You know that there's something lacking, and you're thirsty. Then there's a darkness that conceals the darkness, you don't even know it's dark. Says the same Baal Shem Tov, Tzam L'cha Nafshi, Kom L'cha Psari, my heart, my soul, is thirsty to you. Be'eretz Sia V'oyif, in a parched and dry land. came b'Chodesh Chazisicha. So says the Baal Shem Tov, came b'Chodesh Chazisicha. So also in Chodesh, in holiness, when it's not parched, I should see you. Says the Baal Shem Tov, what's the context? He says, Halavai b'Chodesh Chazisicha. Just as I was thirsty and in very deep yearning and pining, because I was thirsty for the water, for the spiritual waters, to you, Tzam L'cho Nafshi, Halavai that b'Chodesh, when I'm in Chodesh and everything is beautiful and it's holy and everything is comfortable and more than comfortable, godliness, I should also see you with that same passion, with that same search, with that same hunger and thirst. Because that's a difficult challenge. That's the challenge of our times. So Geula, as the Rebbe explained and told us time and again, is a process. Chassidus explains it's a process. It's not an event alone. It concludes with an event, but it's a process where every good deed, every mitzvah that we do, and it has been done throughout history, is a building block. And when it all accumulates, it then erupts, that we are in the Deir HaShvi, the seventh generation, the end of the process. Like Moshe's seventh generation from Avram, that brought the Shekhinah down below, v'shachanti b'seichem, in the temple, in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary. We too are the seventh generation charged with finally bringing down the Shekhinah, this time permanently, in a Dira B'Tachtein, in Basa Legani Legnuni, just as it was in the beginning, but even greater, in a permanent way in the Geula Amitis Vashlema. But you have to feel the thirst for it. You have to feel the need that Elokus is lacking, even if things are comfortable, even if when everybody's healthy, thank God, and all things are going well, and that's all a blessing, to still have the thirst and the desperation for godliness. Not from evil to good, but from good to what is ultimate perfection. The Rebbe, of course, went to war against apathy and never hesitated to awaken us to this reality that Golus is an illness. Not because we feel bad, not because we're sick, God forbid, not because we're oppressed, but because the mere fact that the world is not aligned with its purpose, the mere fact that godliness is not revealed in this world, the mere fact that we can be living duplicitous lives and your heart can be in one place, your faith can be in one place and your heart in another, that alone is the deepest type of Golus. Golus Pnimi, as the Rebbe said, Chof Ches Nissan, 28 years ago. So that's the lesson to us and our personal application, connecting as we about to enter the Chodesh HaGeula. For more cross-reference, for more context and more perspective on these topics, first on the topic of 25th of Adar that I mentioned, go to episodes 155 and 205, as I mentioned. It's all available at meaningfullife.com/mylife. And regarding Tazria, Chodesh, and Chodesh Nissan, episodes 110, 60, and also 64, 205, and 209. Now let's go to some questions. New questions, relevant questions, timely questions. So recently there's been talk about websites. So the question is, what responsibility do websites have to their readers? Today we have a new form of media. Once it was physical newspapers or magazines, and today it's online, accessible to anyone, everyone at any time, on desktops, on laptops, on mobile phones. So when you have a website that is a public domain meaning it could be privately owned, but it's offering public news and public service and so on, what obligation do they have to their readers? Okay, a very relevant question, a very timely question in many ways, relevant on many, many levels. So I personally have a certain personal touch on this regarding my own life, because my father was a journalist and he was the founder and publisher of the Allgemeine Journal. So though obviously there are differences between magazines and journals and newspapers and websites, but I just want to share, to begin with, we always want to share something grounded from the Rebbe. So the Allgemeine, which was founded in 1972, very strongly with encouragement of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe actually gave the name Allgemeine. Who else would give such a name? And explained to my father, because the newspaper is to be all-encompassing, and Allgemeine means general, all-encompassing. And my father once asked the Rebbe a question that, I'll share three anecdotes. One, when it was just founded, then the Rebbe was pushing it. My father asked the Rebbe if he wants Allgemeine to be a Lubavitcher newspaper. So the Rebbe said, Lubavitch and a newspaper are two different agendas. The agenda of a newspaper is to get as many readers and have the broadest type of circulation. The agenda of Lubavitch, Chabad, is spreading Chassidus and Yiddishkeit, Yefutzim and Chutza. So it's not the same thing. Lubavitch is not a newspaper is not Lubavitch. One thing. There was a while later, I'm not sure what year it was, there was some askonim, some activists in the community that had suggested to my father, maybe it's worthwhile to have a vad of rabbonim, rabbis, who will look over everything that goes into the newspaper, make sure it's kosher and proper articles and ads and pictures and so on. My father said, what, did you ask the Rebbe? They said, it's mashmit. They think the Rebbe would like that. So my father said, instead of thinking and speculating, let me ask the Rebbe directly. And my father had an opportunity, many opportunities. He was in Yechidus. And at some point in the Yechidus, my father says, there was some that suggested that maybe there should be a vad of rabbis to look over and oversee the newspaper. The Rebbe smiled and said to my father, what are you going to do if they say to you to close down the newspaper? So my father said, no, if the Rebbe says I should have a vad of rabbanim, in other words, a team of rabbis, and they said to close it down, of course I'll listen to them. The Rebbe picked up his hands and said with another smile, he said, Vikum rabbanim, what do rabbanim have to do with pasking about a newspaper? Rabbanim have to paskin, have to rule that every free moment a person has, a Jew has to be used for learning Torah. Every second you don't learn Torah is bittul Torah. And the Alter Rebbe already says in the beginning of Tanya how serious of an issue that is. He says newspapers are for Jews who don't listen to rabbis or who don't ask rabbis. And when you put a word of Torah or Chassidus in a newspaper, then it reaches even such Jews. The Rebbe went on and shared with my father. He says that when they were in Warsaw, Frierdiker Rebbe told him to go find a newspaper where to print some of the Frierdiker Rebbe's talks. The Frierdiker Rebbe was very into that. Sefer Zechrenis, for example, the memoirs of the Frierdiker Rebbe, were actually printed in the Tag Morgen Journal, and in an earlier stage it was printed in the Amerikaner. And who wrote them? David Leib Meckler. You'll see right in the beginning of Sefer Zechrenis, he was the editor-in-chief of the Tag Morgen Journal. So back in Warsaw, the Frierdiker Rebbe sent the Rebbe. The Rebbe is telling this to my father to find a newspaper where to print the Frierdiker Rebbe's talks, the Deburim, the Kutei Deburim, the Kontreisim. So the Rebbe came back to the Frierdiker Rebbe with a list of 5 newspapers. Remember, you're talking about before World War II. The Frierdiker Rebbe looked at the list. He said, the whole Warschen are 5 Zeitungen. All of Warsaw, there's only 5 newspapers. Remember, there was almost 1 million Jews in Warsaw. There were many, many more newspapers. So the Rebbe said to the Frierdiker Rebbe, no, those aren't the Frume. These are the religious newspapers. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said to the Rebbe, all this the Rebbe told my father, if I want to reach religious Jews, we can distribute the pamphlets in the shtiblach, in the shuls, all over Warsaw. I want to reach Jews that maybe not going to the shuls. So my father asked the Rebbe, what newspaper was it ultimately published? The Rebbe didn't say the name. He said some type of more left socialist type of paper. That was the Rebbe's response. One more anecdote. The Rebbe, my father once told the Rebbe that some people are complaining that the Allgemein is not religious enough. And the Rebbe said, and probably others are going to say it's too religious. Now, I'm not suggesting that we learn lessons in every situation. We know when the Rebbe speaks to one person and one entity, it means that entity. And perhaps the Allgemein had a particular role to play. But it's interesting to know the Rebbe's cook, how he looked at something. So now let's take it to, being that I grew up in this home and my father was a responsible publisher, and yes, he had complaints from people. Some people didn't like this and some people didn't like that. You couldn't make everybody happy. So what standards did he use? Now the fact of the matter is a website, a responsible website, obviously not just for business purposes wants to satisfy its customers, from ethical purposes it has a responsibility. Because people look to it for news, or for updates, or for announcements, and you want it to be on the highest possible standard. But at the same time, who defines the standard? You have very different opinions. You ask even different rabbis, even different Chassidus. So my suggestion would be that every public domain, and I'm saying even not Jewish one, is also has responsibility. You don't just put things out there because you're dealing with a public they rely, like the Rebbe would say many times in the Fabrein, that state not citing. If it says in the newspaper, everyone thinks it's true. But it's more than that. It creates an image and a perception. So there's responsibility, anyone in the public domain in that way. Anyone who's a writer, anyone who's a speaker, anyone who is communicating to a large audience or a small audience has extra responsibility, because they're not just a private citizen. Extra responsibility to make sure that what they convey is not just true, but also reflective of the standards that, in this case, we're talking Chabad standards, the Rebbe standards. Being that not Ein Dei Yisei and Shavas, there are different opinions. So how do you make a decision? That's why every entity should have, hopefully, its own internal checks and balances, where it has people that are objective, that help establish the guidelines. And when there's a doubt, you ask 2-3 people, and that way you try to stay as honest as possible and maintain the highest integrity as possible. Unfortunately, we live in a world where not only there are different opinions, people also can take on extreme positions and hostile positions and angry positions. And then you can get the situation where you start trying to do things like boycotts and other type of efforts. I personally do not think that's the approach to take. First of all, do you know whether you'll be successful or not? Even though you say, it hurts you, you cry out, but still, you want it to be methodical and appropriate. Second of all, your opinion of what something may be, there may be other people that are also legitimate and have a different opinion than you. So I think before we take any positions of strong statements, you have to do everything possible to higher the standard by trying to influence with Gutzkeit. My father was an independent journalist, and he was very independent. And yet he definitely had checks and balances. Did he not make mistakes? He made mistakes. He had his own internal way of checking, and it's not my business to tell you or not to tell you, not everything I knew myself, how he did that. But he had that responsibility. And still, sometimes he wrote something and one party didn't like it. And then he wrote exactly the opposite and another party didn't like it. So this is the responsibility of any type of journalism or public communication. But if you do have integrity and you have objective parties that you can talk to, that to me is the key to everything. Whether you'll be perfect or not, we don't know. Now, everyone has the freedom to visit a website or not visit a website. But that still doesn't mean the website should not have standards and the highest possible standards. I would strongly not suggest, suggest that boycotts and angry and very strong terms should not be used, because they usually don't end up with good results. Everything with goodness. Now, you say, I tried with good, and people don't listen. So you know what? Maybe you have to try again, and maybe you have to try with a different approach. And there's nothing wrong with putting on some type of pressure. But I think the best way to do it is that it shouldn't come across that there's a battle, there's a war. Because when you do that, there's always casualties, there's always collateral damage, and nobody really benefits from it. Now, of course, that's my opinion. Others may have a different opinion, and you're all entitled to your opinion. I never censor anyone's opinion. You feel free to write to me, and I'll be happy to read your thoughts. And I think it's critical that we realize that there is a great responsibility. At the same time, there are standards, and that the standards themselves are also subject to many different opinions. So that's why you need to have, as I said again, a type of a diverse inner checks and balances, a diverse people you consult, especially when something is more controversial. And that way you can stay and say at least you're living up to that standard. That's the way I would suggest it, and nothing wrong with announcing your policies and general policies, but you also don't want to become a situation that anyone who suddenly doesn't like something, and there are people that are always not going to like something, are going to be able to say, you know what, I don't like what you wrote, even if you have high standards, this time I don't like something, and therefore I'm going to use aggressive measures. You can't be subject to such type of threats and blackmail, because at the end of the day, then it takes away from the integrity of any good side as well. So you have to have a good balance. And I think mature people with a little gadlus hamechen can definitely come together and put their heads together and come up with the standards. Again, it won't be perfect, but that is the responsibility of a website to its readers and to its subscribers, to its advertisers as well. Okay. And finally, this is a complicated business. I can tell you, I lived in a home where no one is ever happy. But at the same time, you have a tremendous contribution to make, because you can actually help shape in a good way public opinion and give people information and give people wise information and even diverse opinions so they can make wise choices. All, of course, based on the integrity and the standards that have been established and by the Rebbe and including by Rabbonim. And Rabbonim as well are also subject to be asked, Mehechan Dantuni, from where do you take what you're saying in a respectable way? And there's different countries have different standards, and that too is subject to many opinions. And I think any Rav will tell you different communities, different standards. Now that doesn't mean completely the extremes, but it means that there is room for this latitude when it comes to this. Okay. Strongly dissuade, that was the word I was looking for. Strongly dissuade. Okay. What future is there in this challenging day and age for a yeshiva student without a secular education? How do you explain the Rebbe's approach in our times? Okay, this of course is back to the topic that has been addressed many times here. The Rebbe's approach to secular education, basically negating it, definitely in the general sense of it. The question is to what extent. Listen, teaching your child how to ride a bicycle or drive a car or basic mathematics, obviously this is something that's done. The Rebbe did not negate that. But in a formal way, and I discussed this at length, I'm not going to go through all I discussed. But since the topic keeps coming up, I would say that Rebbe's approach remains eternal for all times. Yes, there may be challenges today, and here's the question as it's spelled out in more detail. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. How do you reconcile the Rebbe's Shitta with secular studies when we see more than ever that the shlichus spots are drying up? And what future is there in this challenging day and age for an Aholoteirenik, Yeshiva Bacher, without a secular education? The Rebbe wanted Kulei Kodesh. Everything should be Kodesh. In other words, Kulei Kodesh means Limudei Kodesh, Torah studies, all day Torah learning. How do you reconcile this approach in our challenging times? Kind regards. Another person writes, my question is, what is the Rebbe's approach on young men that have just left yeshiva, are now at marriageable age, and need to find their source of parnasa, income? And there's two parts to that. One, finding what type of creative things you'd like to pursue, and two, how to turn that, whatever job you can get a hold of, into a somewhat of a decent experience, versus just jumping into a relationship because that's what everyone in the system at your age does. Okay, so number one is I've spoken about this at length and probably can't add much. So let me refer you first of all to when I've spoken about it. Episodes 153, 201, 203, 207, 232, and 233. More about secular studies I spoke about in episodes 24 through 27, 149, 153, 202 and 203, 209 and 221. You can go there, they're all time-stamped, you can see exactly what was said. I gathered from all the different sikhs of the Rebbe, the position, and how to apply it to our times. As far as the question about shlichus, first of all, you say dried up. It's not dried up. It could be there are challenges today how to find a shlichus, but there are 14.5 million Jews that have not been reached. Most of them have not been reached. 1 million have been reached. 10% have been reached. 20%. That's number one. There's 7.5 billion people on this planet that have to be reached as well. So to suggest it's dried up is absolutely incorrect. We may need new creative ways how to reach those people online or other ways, but there's plenty to do. If a person is dedicated to the core mission of bringing the Geula through your futzah and chutz, so there are many ways to do it, and ways where you could also financially support it and be financially successful. I've spoke about this, and you just have to use your minds and think of it in that way if you really believe that this is the core mission, which is, obviously that's what was stated by the Rebbe, stated by Mashiach to the Baal Shem Tov. And this has remained the core mission of Chabad, and really of all Eden, should be of all Eden on this planet. So it's a matter of finding how, not if, whether. Regarding the issue of secular education and parnasa, look, I'm not coming here to judge anyone or criticize anyone. But if you want to live up to the Rebbe standards, the Rebbe has spoken what he wants. And what our tachlis is, what the ultimate purpose of why your neshama came down here. To have a certain measure of skills that are necessary to survive, necessary to work, to live in this world, that is a given. That is something that we all have to have in our and our parents are as responsible to give that to their children. The question of how much Does one need to graduate with degrees, in particular secular studies? From the Rebbe's point of view, that's not necessary to succeed in life and to even succeed in business. But definitely not to succeed in the shlichus of a person. So, as I said, I spoke about this at length, and I just reiterating it again because this is a topic that comes up and again. And a person does go and look for a parnasa, so fine. You're going to go to some trade school or some classes online or so on. You do that. And I would not tell you, don't do it. If that's the only thing that's left for you to do and you're not looking any other way, then try your best to learn on the job or learn from experts. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to college. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to immerse yourself in a whole array of secular studies. Maybe you have to study that trade that you want to learn, whether it's computer programming or design or other skills. And basically knowing that it's all a means to an end. So even if a person goes into business, even if a person is going into the trades or the skills of our time, know that that's a means to an end. The end is to create a dira b'tachtenim, a home for God in this world. And when you know that's the mission, then you learn what's necessary to do whatever you have to do. Just like when you drive a car, nobody drives a car to drive a car. You drive a car to get somewhere in order to fulfill something. You learn to knock in a nail with a hammer and use a tool chest also for a certain purpose. And the same thing, whether it's in business or in other type of skills and other skill sets, are all means to a higher end. And that's what I'll suffice with that. And let's move to the next question. Can a Rebbe make a mistake? Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. Your classes are insightful and delightful. My question concerns the belief in the infallibility of a Rebbe. It seems almost axiomatic to many Chassidim that the Rebbe is the last word on any topic. Some ascribe it to Ruach HaChodesh. Ruach HaChodesh literally means the Holy Spirit, that Hashem has given him a certain higher consciousness, a higher vision. Some to genius, some to both. But what are the sources for this belief? Tanakh is filled with tzaddikim making mistakes. As in the Talmud, I believe it is Rebbe who's quoted several times saying, Dvarim she'amarti lefnechem to'ashem biyodi. That the words that I said before you were a mistake. And he was one of the greatest Amoraim, sages, Talmudic sages. I have heard that the Rebbe quoted this on at least one occasion, announcing that he had erred, though I have not seen that in print and do not know the context. So when's the belief in infallibility? Thank you, and wishing you a wonderful and the sweetest of Pesachs. Okay, so firstly, let me refer you to episodes 198 to 199. It's a very good question, and though it's not so comfortable always to read a question, can a Rebbe make a mistake? Can the Rebbe make a mistake? But since it's a question people have, so let me address it. Let me begin with this. There's a sikha from the Rebbe Lech Lecha, Chelik Hey, volume, Likutei Sichos, volume 5. He talks about the concept of chet, sin, by the Ovis. Now we know the Ovis, Hein Merkava. They were Merkava 24/7, the Alter Rebbe says, Perich Gimel and other places, in Tanya, that they were 24/7, completely Merkava, a chariot, a vehicle for godliness. No wavering 1 second. And yet the word chet is used. So the Rebbe explains, based on Chassidus, that chet comes from the word chesaron. Chet can mean a sin, could also mean a deficiency. That based on the level what they could have reached, they didn't reach the ultimate. So it's not a, God forbid, a true transgression. It's just based on that level. We talk about Moshe Rabbeinu, hitting the stone instead of speaking to the stone. And because of that, he was punished. It was a chil Hashem, because he changed. God said, speak to the stone. Now, hitting a stone and speaking to a stone both require the same amount of faith, because a stone does not have water, does not give water. And the first time Hashem said to Moshe, speak, hit the stone. So Moshe is not like if he said, a stone doesn't give water, that skepticism is not appropriate. But what did he do? He hit the stone. So, but on the level of Moshe, that high standard, that little shift for the Jewish people, that was already enough. So there are times when we say an error does not mean a full-blown error, as you and I may make a mistake, but it could be a deficiency based on the level where he could have reached. We know it says that the Eibishter created 50 gates of Bina. Nun Shari Bina, Chamishim Shari Bina, Nivre Be'el. Created 50 gates. And 49 were given to us. Even Moshe, the person who spoke face to face to God, the person who saw God. And yet it says the 50th gate he was unable to achieve till Har Nevoi. Nevoi is Nun Boyd, says the Magid. That's where he got Shar HaNun. Because he's lacking the Shar HaNun, that's why he's called Chela. Chela is a gematria memtes. Chela means a sick person. We talk about a sick person. It could be someone who's a geisha, someone who's, God forbid, struggling to breathe, someone who's on his deathbed. And here you say, Chela Moshe Rabbeinu. Chela's Ava. Sick, love sick. Why? Because he was lacking the memtes, he was lacking the 50th gate. Now, most of us don't even have the first or second gate. But for a Moshe Rabbeinu lacking, if the Geula does not come, so for a tzaddik there's lacking. When we say that the Arizal, he said al chet. So his Talmidim asked, why does Arizal saying al chet, a tzaddik gomer? On what? Especially such sins. So two answers are given. One, he's saying it for the generation, as a leader of the generation. Number two, a tzaddik has the whole generation, Neshama Klolis has the whole generation within him. Famous story of the Mittler Rebbe, that when he gave a tikkun, a repair to someone, he had to find it within him. So bedakus, in a subtle way, all these transgressions exist in the neshama. That's why it says in Mashiach, the Rebbe brings it in Bas Lagani Tavshin Aleph, that he will suffer and have from our wounds. Why? Why should he suffer due to our wounds? Because that's a neshama klolis. Would you compare it to our setbacks and our transgressions and our weaknesses? Absolutely not. But bedakus the dakus in a very subtle way. So that's the first thing. That obviously exists until the Gula Amitis Vashlema, Lefi Erech, what a tzaddik, what a Rebbe can achieve. The Rebbe did not bring the Gula, and that's why he said what he said, that everything I did was Lehevel Larik. How could you say that? All that the Rebbe accomplished. The Medrash says in Kehelis Rabba that the Teire Be'elam Hazeh is Hevel. Hevel, the same word. Hevel hu legabe terosa shel Mashiach. How could you call it Hevel? Hevel means naught. It means nothingness. The whole Teire, Matan Teire, Tanoim, Amaroim, Shas, Mishnah, Gemara, Rishenim, Achreinim, everything is all Hevel. Because if you know what the Teire is like when Mashiach comes, Terosa shel Mashiach, compared to that, relative to that, it's called Hevel. So that's relative. Now, as far as why we say infallibility, a human being is a human being. Human being, like you said from Rebbe, can make a mistake. It's true. But the Rebbe has higher keiches. He's a human being, but God also protects him. And Shechina medaberes meteich greine. So when he speaks, we say the Shechina speaks through his throat. So then how could the Rebbe say what he said? Because there's a famous story. Rabbi Hillel was sitting at a table. They were discussing the Maimed that Tzemach Tzedek had said earlier. Tzemach Tzedek was also there. There's different versions of the story. And Rabbi Hillel was arguing with the Tzemach Tzedek, Pshat in the Maimed. So they said, how could you argue? The Rebbe himself said this Maimed. So when the Rebbe said it was Kinisan Nosei Sinai. That was like it was given for Sinai. So obviously it's divine. Divrei Elikim Chaim. But now we're speaking Al Pi Seichel. And Al Pi Seichel, we're all discussing it. The Rebbe is using his Seichel. I'm using my Seichel. Now obviously, that's the story ends there. Obviously, that doesn't mean the Rebbe's Seichel could be greater than your Seichel. But there's the Rebbe as he's a Chochem, not just a Novi, or not just a Baal Ruach HaKodesh, or not just Shechina Medaberes B'Teich Greine. Even then, we say that a Rebbe's Seichel is probably infallible. But you could see that there's levels, and therefore there's possibility that a Rebbe, as he's a boss of a dom, and not relying on being that channel, could perhaps say something and then later say, I reconsider it. Which the Rebbe did say more than once, many times. But it's not a contradiction, because a Rebbe is still a Rebbe, and people relied on the Rebbe when the Rebbe said something. That said, even the doctor said, do something, the Rebbe said not to do it. You could say, how does the Rebbe know? That's why the Rebbe is a Rebbe. He's not coming with his own keiches. So the source for it is, if you take away the Amun in Moshe, Moshe was the one that carried the Torah to us. So you could say, how do you know that maybe Moshe didn't hear it right exactly on Har Sinai? If you say that, the whole Torah can be disqualified. So you have to say the Eibishter gave Moshe the koyach that he would convey the Torah exactly as he heard it, without adding, without subtracting. And yet then Moshe sits in a bezdin with other skenim, and they argue and they discuss, as it says in Medrash, that the Eibishter tells Moshe, Memtes Panim, 49 ways to interpret a pasuk this way, 49 this way. And Moshe says, so what's the conclusion? The Eibishter says, Achrei Rabim Lahates. You'll follow the consensus. And obviously Moshe wanted, why not just give me straight? Halach l'Moshe Messina, tell me what to do. No, I want you to be partners in Torah. I want you to argue it out. And Moshe could say something, and there could be another Talmud Chacham that could argue with Moshe. So you see, Moshe is then manifesting in so-called Hishtalshlus. Now we see this even by Hashem. There's a point where we say God is obviously infallible and beyond everything. But then there's how God manifests himself and says, Kosher ke Kriyas Yamsuf. How could Kriyas Yamsuf be difficult for God? So Chassidus answers, the Mittler Rebbe answers, and other Maimorim. Because the way God, he himself subjected himself and bound himself to the rules of nature, Lo yushbesu, I will not suspend the rules of nature. So in Havayahu Elikim, in Elikim b'gematria teva, in the world that God himself created, he himself has bound himself to his own rules. So kosher legabe those rules. It's obviously not difficult. Legabe kol yachol. God can do whatever he wants. And then you have expressions, kaloni mizreya, kaloni bereshi, that when a person below is in pain, God says, my hand hurts, my arm hurts, my head hurts. God's hurts? Yeah, but we say, how could you say that? Because there's a way God manifests and says the Shtalshus, as Chassidus explains in the Esser Spheres, and how he interacts with existence. On that level, there's kavyochel, so to speak. God is interacting, and you could kavyochel. Teira dibra b'loshem b'nei adam. The Teira speaks in the language of man, so therefore there can be kavyochel, so to speak, somewhat of, you could say, a chesodin, even in godly energy, so to speak. So, Makolshkein, for sure, tzaddikim deim lebeiram, that you could explain the same idea by tzaddikim in their own way. Okay. Next question. Who is the tzaddik yesod olam nowadays? Dear Rabbi Jacobson, thank you so much for your ever-inspiring weekly My Life Chassidus Applied video classes. I truly enjoy them. My question is, since the passing of the Rebbe, who is the tzaddik yesod olam? Best wishes for you and yours. Tzadik yesod olam is a posuk that Alter Rebbe brings us in Tanya. Tzadik is the foundation of the world, and that in every tzaddik, in every generation, shoslan b'chol der v'der, God planted in every generation tzaddikim, and at least one tzaddik. That's the foundation. As Rashbi said, im echad anihu. If there's one, it's two. There's two. It's you and I. To Rabbi Lozer, his son, and if it's one, I need tzaddik yesod olam. So he's asking the question, what about now after Gimel Tammuz? First of all, I don't have answers to all questions. I don't know why Gimel Tammuz happened. I don't even know what it means. We know there's the Deir HaShvi. We know the Rebbe is the Nasi of the Deir HaShvi. And we always were taught and believe that till the Geula comes. So you could firstly say Tzadik yesod olam continues in some way. Though it's not fully understood, but it continues. Or you say, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. It's up to God how he figures it out. But you have to say there's a logic to tzaddik yesod olam, that there's a tzaddik that protects the world, so to speak, that holds it up like a foundation. And you have to say that exists now too. First of all, we see it in our own keches, things we do, the efforts we make. We see the hatzlacha. And secondly, perhaps in this situation, maybe once exception in history, even though it says tzaddik shtakach yatir mibechayehu, that after the passing, he's even here more present than before, because he's not limited by a body, as the Alter Rebbe explains the Zohar in Ageres HaKodesh, Simech of Zion, 27. And Yaakov Avinu loy mes, so perhaps all that can be applied to here. But beyond that, I am not going to speculate further, because I'm not an expert in this necessarily, and I don't think anyone really may know. There are things we don't fully understand. But to say, God forbid, that we don't have a yesod olam, that for sure not. How it works exactly, that's already up to different ways of interpreting it. Okay, next question. Does yogati u'matzasi actually work? All my life I was taught that if you try hard to change yourself, you will succeed. It was explained that if you repeatedly do the right thing, then eventually you won't have to try so hard, and it will come naturally. However, experience has shown me that this doesn't always work. As a teenager, I have tried to put effort in davening and saying chitas, and also in my midas, my personality, like not getting angry, but it has never produced long-term results. I concluded that I was not trying hard enough, but this thought wasn't discouraging. As a young adult, however, I learned that a more effective way of changing habits is to look deeper at what is happening inside myself. and change the way I think, thereby changing the way I act. Obviously, there's still the simple effort of trying to do the right thing. Is this what our Chachamim meant when they said, try hard and you will succeed? Or did they mean controlling the negative habit until it stops? Thank you. Well, let's say the full Maimer Chazal, which is one of the Yud-Beis Psukim Maimer Chazal that the Rebbe chose. Someone who says, Lo yogati matzosi, al taimin, don't believe it. The Rebbe explains, not just don't accept it, don't even believe it, not even faith can believe such a thing. Someone says, yogati, I made an effort, lo matzosi, do not believe them. Someone says, yogati matzosi, taimin, I made an effort and I found it, taimin. So you have three different statements that make it unequivocal what it means. It means that there's no such thing as making an effort and you will not find. What effort means, I would say it includes everything, including what you said. Sometimes an effort could be that you're putting an effort in something, and then you realize, or some objective person tells you, you want to achieve those results, you have to do it a different way. That's also part of an effort. Effort doesn't mean just toiling at the same thing again and again. It may mean looking for new ways to achieve the result, the intended result. Effort means also using your ingenuity and finding maybe new ways to do it. The point of effort means that it's not just going to happen automatically. You need to apply yourself. So it's not in the literal limited sense that you keep knocking, let's say you keep knocking on the door and the door is going to finally open. Maybe you have to go through the window. Maybe you have to find another way to open the door. So you're absolutely correct. Sometimes when you're saying the effective way of changing habit is to look deeper at what is happening inside myself and change the way you think instead of changing what you do, that is also included in the word yogati. Yogati mitzosi is a fundamental principle, frankly, not just in Judaism. In the secular world, they say 99% effort, 99% execution, 1% ingenuity or idea or concept. When they say, what do they say? 1%, 99% sweat, the effort that we have to put into things. There are different expressions that don't come to mind right now. So effort is something that everyone knows. When you're persistent, you keep the effort going, one way or the other, you're going to find the result. Now, sometimes Hashem says this is not the result. You'll get a different result. You'll see in businesses, many times they put an effort to a certain direction, and then they realize that the success will come a different way. But the effort yielded result. That's the point. Yogati mitzosi, the mitzosi comes after yogati. It's not always the mitzosi that you intended. That's another important thing. So both the effort means different efforts can be in the same vein or different ways to reach the intended goal, or the effort will bring a goal that was maybe not exactly as you wanted it, but matzosi, what you need, and will be success in your life. Like I said, it could be you're investing in a business for one reason, then suddenly you find an opportunity opens up. That would never have opened had you not made the effort. And the opportunity makes you extremely wealthy. Would you call that matzosi? Absolutely. And since we're talking on the topic of Geula, mitzosi, also the Gemara says three things are becoming an ephron of mitzvah, behesach hadas, and one of them is Mashiach. So Mashiach too will ultimately come through yogati, but it'll be matzosi that even though we made the effort, and even though we are hoping for it, and we're expecting it, and we're awaiting it, there's a certain element of surprise that will happen no matter what, because it's coming from a place that's higher than das, hesach hadas, higher than consciousness. Just as another little point here. So yogati, of all our efforts, will definitely bring matzosi, David avdecha. That matzosi, that's what the pasuk says. I'll find David. Why find? Because like a mitzvah, you'll find it almost like in a non-deliberate way, in an super conscious fashion. Next question. Giving my son the choice to have a bris later in life. Why can't I give my son the choice to have a bris later in life? I have thoughts on the bris that I wish to share with you. Until now, I have taken for granted that circumcision was a given for any Jewish boy. Yet now I find that in search for truth and being intentional, I take nothing that I focus on for granted, if I have a say. I understand that so much about life I have yet to learn, and is most likely that will come at the end of my lifetime. I will have come and gone with much still unknown. At the same time, for the actions that I do take, I wish to be clear on and take action with my own understanding and responsibility leading me as I grow from my own experiences. Unless it's actually proven that it is safer to cut off a piece of the body that God created a healthy boy with, I choose to allow a son born to me with God's will to decide later in his life for himself rather than have him be circumcised for the sake of tradition. And even as doctors and physicians do find a number of health benefits for circumcision, there are ways to have it done in less extreme fashion than the customary Orthodox method, which I was raised and likely expected to continue to raise my own. If you have the time and willingness to share your thoughts, I would greatly appreciate your advice or suggestions. With respect. Yes, I absolutely want to address this. This is a very different type of question than we usually get on My Life Chassidus Applied. But since it did come in, and since it's important to address, I must say to you that I'm a little surprised. Circumcision is not some new modern invention. Circumcision goes back to one of the earliest biblical edicts given to Avram Avinu, almost 4,000 years, 3,800 years. The Jewish people are the only people that have survived for all this time. So they must have done something right. I would go the exact opposite approach. You said it yourself. Just because you don't understand doesn't mean there isn't value. There are many things we don't understand. The mere fact that this has been an unbroken tradition and in a mitzvah done through the most difficult times and the best times tells you there's power to it. Now you may say you don't accept what it says in the Torah. So of course I'm going with the axiom that the Torah is given to us by God, and that's God's commandment to Avram Avinu. And God that created the healthy boy says this is what will make him even healthier, with the different explanations given for that. Rabbi Akiva was already asked by the philosopher if God wanted circumcision, why didn't he create circumcised boys? So Rabbi Akiva answered with the question, if God wanted us to have bread, why didn't he give us bread? Instead, he gave us the ability to plant seeds, grain. And then the grain we have to process, we have to cultivate, and then we process, and then we have to thresh it, and then we cut it, and we crush it, and we use it for flour, and the flour we mix with water, and it turns into bread. Because God wants a partnership in this world. He gives us the resources and wants us to develop those resources. But the fact is that circumcision has been done in an unbroken chain for thousands of years. So I would not tamper with success on a very basic level. If you start reading the deeper reasons, you can also understand also some of the reasons. Though we may never fully understand God's commandments, but that's how I would approach it. So I would strongly discourage you from taking this attitude, but take the other attitude, which is do it, and not has any takol, has any negative thing ever come out from someone being circumcised. If anything, there are health benefits, as you mentioned, but even if not, So that's the way I would approach it, and I say it very strongly because when you come from an approach where we see thousands of years and we see what the Torah says unambiguously about this mitzvah, it's one of the mitzvahs that is as clear as day what it means. The 13 times it says Bris in the Torah, and this is the covenant beinichem, between me and God, between God says between me and you, and the Jewish people, and many, many millions of others, including Muslims, who have also embraced this command, and even others who do so for the different reasons they have. Okay. Let me do one more, since we've been talking about tefillah davening. I said I would, I'll just address one point in davening, then go to the Chassidus question. So this has been a continuing series, how can we begin to daven the way Chassidus expects of us, called Prayer Continued. Thank you very much for addressing this subject again. You explained that the key is that after learning some Chassidus, one should endeavor to become excited about neshama matters and elikus matters. Right. Rabbi Jacobson, please explain this critical component. 1. How does one get excited about neshama matters and godly matters? Beyond the feeling of having understood what was studied, where does personal excitement about the levels one has studied come from? Please explain the steps, beginning with learning a piece of Chassidus before davening, that one takes to make this happen. What does this emotional work look like? Please be specific enough so that we can apply this. Chassidus applied. Okay. There's more questions, but I'll do that next week. How do we get excited about anything? So some things come natural to us because we live in this physical world and we just naturally have inclinations to physical pleasures. And we get excited by them. It could be food, it could be nonsense, it could be something a little valuable, reading, intellectual pursuits. The way you get excited about something is appreciating it. When it comes to neshama matters and elikus matters, God made it not so easy. He made elikus is bischachus and elim is bepshitus. The natural inclination of a person, we feel physical hunger, we feel physical thirst. We don't feel spiritual thirst. But that doesn't mean we can't achieve it. That's exactly the mitzvah. So when you learn Chassidus in the morning, you learn it in a way not just a theory. You learn it like it is part of who you are. This is the soul that makes you tick. Neshama shenasata bi. Shechzarta bi nishmasi. This is my soul. And my soul, let's say you're learning that neshama is made up of nefesh, ruach, neshama, chay, yechid. Or neshama is made up of keiches, meichen, and midas. You're learning about yourself. The more you can relate to it personally, that is the most exciting thing. You're learning what makes you work, what makes you function. Elokus is not just an abstract idea, there's godliness. Godliness is godly energy that sustains us. Godliness is the truth of reality. And as you climb the ladder of understanding godliness, you're climbing the ladder of understanding emes. There's great pleasure to know the truth. Ein simcha katoras hasveiches. There's no joy than resolving doubts. All intellectual pursuits are that way. You have a lot of confusion and you achieve clarity. What do you feel like? You get excited. Same thing here. When you can understand the inner workings that make existence exist, what energy, what divine energy flows and how it flows, and the different ways that it sustains and energizes and vitalizes and revitalizes existence, there's an excitement in that. No different than lahavdlas, a physicist getting excited about discovering subatomic particles and their different ways of functioning. The key is to relate to it personally. The key is to relate to it in an applied way. You're asking me for examples. I give it every week when we speak about different things. You talk about understanding the deeper dimension of reality and ultimately what put reality here in the first place. So we would have to take a piece of Chassidus and do that. Any piece of Chassidus you learn, let's say you learn, I'm just learning in Ayin Beis now, we learned this morning about, we're learning about Gan Eden HaTachten, Gan Eden Elyon. Then Gan Eden HaTachten, even though it's elokus, godliness, but you feel it, you're conscious of it. In Gan Eden and Elyon, you don't sense it. It's like being in the zone where you're just experiencing something without feeling the subject and the object. We can apply this. For example, lahavdil, when you read a book, you can read the book and be very aware. I'm reading a book, I'm reading words, it's exciting me, it's touching me, but I'm the reader and here's the book. Or you could be so absorbed in a book, you don't even realize you're turning pages, you don't even realize you're reading words. You're so immersed, you become one with it. You could be up all night, so immersed, you become one with something. So that's a very exciting idea. How do you get into the zone? How can you be immersed in something to the point where you become one with it? You become one with it. That's an example. And you can go through any idea, any Maimer in Chassidus. I just read in Teda Shalom. Every word in Chassidus has that type of application. It has the ability to look at it personally. That's how you get excited about it. And when you understand it that way, that awakens different feelings, including a love and an awe, and so on. Much more to be said, but that suffices for now. Let's go to the Chassidus question of the week. Here, dear Rabbi Jacobson, Chassidus talks about here as a result of Meisrei Meichen. Meisrei Meichen literally means the leftovers of Meichen. I'll explain that shortly. Does Chassidus Kabbalah discuss the reason of different hair colors, white hair and baldness? Thank you. So first of all, I've spoken about hair in general in episodes 95 through 97 and 209 about Mitzvah in this week's Parshas, actually. Also, there it talks a bit about baldness as well. But regarding your question about hair colors, yes, absolutely. There's a famous mimer called Sad HaSchira. Sad HaSchira means the great razor. It refers to a pasuk in Yeshaya. We're talking about the Eibishter punishing Sancherev, Melech Ashur. Talked about Ashur. B'yema hu yigalech Hashem b'sad HaSchira be'ever nor b'melech Ashur es hareish v'sad ha'reglayim v'gam es hazoken Tispa. Translated loosely, it means, on that day Hashem shall shave the great razor on the other side of the river on the king of Assyria. That's Sancherev. The head and the hair of the legs and also the beard shall be entirely removed. So there's a mimer from the Alter Rebbe, written by the Mittler Rebbe. It's printed in Eira Teira Nach, volume 2, page 767 and on. A fascinating mimer. And Ayin Beis, volume 1, chapter 182, it's the end of the famous Sheftim Tafresh Ayin Gimel, where the Rebbe Rashab elaborates a bit as well on this idea. Basically, he says there's 3 levels of hair. But first, before we go to 3 levels, let's talk, what is hair? Physically, hair is like thin strands that come out of different parts of the body. The hair on the head, the hair on the body The beard grows when you're an adult. So what is here? Physically, it's coming out. It's also a protector, and it's like a filter. Filters out bacteria and dust and so on. But the human being was created b'tselem elikim. So everything, the physical body reflects spiritual dimensions. The Adam Elyon, the supernal man, also has, just like we have a mind and a heart, moyach lev kavod and a body, torso and so on. We also in Ruchnius is that way. And here is also a level. What is here? It's moisrei meich. Just like the hair grows out of the head, so Chassidus explains, here are like thin wires that carry very, very narrow flow of energy from the moichin. Moichin is very intense. The mind power, mind. Moisrei meichin is that which they hear. So that's why when you pull a hair, you feel a little pain because the nerve is connected. But when you cut it, you don't feel anything because it's a very minimum form of energy. What is it referring to? As he explains in this Maimon in very beautiful terms, that when you're trying to bring godliness, which is beyond everything, beyond existence, beyond structure, beyond infinite even, how can this godliness be channeled into a finite, structured existence? So we know this was called tzimtzumim. The tzimtzum addition conceals the divine, and then there's all the different tzimtzumim and seder shtalshos that diminish to allow the flow. Think of it like a water main. That's infinite amount of water, but how to get to your faucet? It has to go through to get into smaller pipes until you finally get it accessible to you. Same thing with electricity. These are just examples. How much more so with the infinite divine? So the whole Seder Shtalshlus is really a network of pipes and channels and vessels that carry the energy, each tailored to its particular level. When you need to make a special leap from a very high level to a lower level, you can't just use a regular pipe. You need to have a very thin strand. That's called Chassidus. That's hair. So the origination of hair in its source, before it became human, is the ability to carry energy, but in a very minimal way. So you have a connection to the source, like, when you pull it, but it's so minimal that the recipient can receive it. So essentially the Chassidus reflect that type of tzimtzum. And that Maimer explains that there are 3 levels of tzimtzum, 3 types of hair. One is white hair that it says in the Pasuk in Daniel, Zayin Tes. It says, Atikim Yosef al Kusaya, the one of ancient years, Atikim, in the level of Atikim and deep divine pleasure, the higher level of Keser, sits on a throne, V'sareshik Omernaka. And the hair on his head is white like wool. So that's white hair. That's the level of Atik and Chesed. It is a tzimtzum because it's hair, but its chesed means the flow is a very positive one. It's a minimal one, but it's chesed. The second is black hair from the Pasuk in Shir HaShirim. Where's the Pasuk? (5:11). So the Pasuk says, Reishei kesem paz kivtseisov tiltilim shichres ka'erev, which means his head is as the fine as gold, his locks are curled, they're black as a raven, black hair. Black hair, he says, that's the hair of Zoh, not Atik, Zoid Ampin of the Midas. That's, okay, that's already black, because black is already Gevura. It's a darker energy, so the tzimtzum is even deeper. And then there's the third, which is red hair. And that's from the Pasuk in Shir HaShirim, Hey Yud Aleph, 5:11. V'reishach alayich kekarmel, v'dilas reishach kargomon melech oser b'rihitim. The braided locks of your head are like argomon, as the Rebbe, as the Tzemach Tzadik explains there, that's, in this case, red. Sometimes it's purple, but there he talks about it as red. Red is Malchus. That's the hair of Malchus. You have the hair of Atik, the hair of, which is white hair, the black hair of Zoh Midas, and the Malchus is red hair. Red is also Gevura. He discusses there whether that's a higher tzimtzum than the dark hair of Zoh or not. You could look it up. But what does this mean in practical terms? It's referring to Teira. Teira is compared, halachas are compared also to hair. Like combing hair, where you separate the hairs, it's the clarification, the crystallizing of halachas to make sure that you get it exactly clear. So it's compared to combing here, separate hair strands. And in halacha itself, as the Maimer explains, and especially in Ayin Beis, that talk about 3 different levels of halachas. One is the halachas in Atik, that he doesn't really explain in detail. That's the Chodesh HaTeira, Pnimius HaTeira. Then there's halachas that distinguish between purity and impurity. That's Zah, that's the hair of Zah, that distinguishes between that. That's Pnimius HaTeira, but the revealed part of Pnimius HaTeira. And then there's the revealed part of revealed Teira, that's the red hair of Malchus, as he explains in this Mamorim. So there you have the significance. What the application, of course, is that when we think of our own hair, we are thinking of our hair as being reflections, nishtalshel mehen, of how it is above, that our hair is teaching us lessons of how we connect to the divine energy, a very intense energy, very high levels, as it's channeled to us through these strands. So each one of us, when we're learning Teira, Teira is, of course, beyond everything. And yet the Teira was given to us that even a child can learn, because it's channeled to us through hair. So here is the example of the channeling. And our job is to accept that, receive that energy, and then reverse the process, retrace the steps, and broaden the channels so we can connect all the way back to Atik and higher in our process of relating to the divine. Okay, now let's do the 3 essays. Here we are. Essay number 1, this is still essays from 2018. Finding God in the Empty Spaces. Yehudis Fishman, age 75, Boulder, Colorado, self-employed teacher and speaker. Each person is called on olam kotne, a miniature world. As someone whose Jewish life has spanned the 20th and 21st centuries, with all its individual and concomitant social challenges, I have struggled to find a sense of meaning and purpose in my olam kotne, in my small world, and have been guided primarily from above in that endeavor. I would like to write about how Chassidic ideas and teachings have accompanied me through a lifetime of challenges. My aspiration is that the readers will be inspired enough by my life quest for those teachings, to search for those teachings that can light up their own personal journeys and destinies. She goes on to talk about this in a very, very personal way, and how Chassidus enriched her life, not just enriched, opened up her whole life, especially the concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim, coming out of that place. And she talks about it in the context of her own personal life. Very touching essay. My mother from the Rebbe, on essay Eine ala Harim, and different quotations. I found it very moving, and I'm sure you'll find it very well as well. It's hard to sum up, because it's not so much an idea, it's more of a life story, but life story through the eyes of Chassidus, and how she applies it to her own personal growth and journey. It's not a short essay, but it's well worth reading. This essay and all other new essays are posted at meaningfullife.com/mylife. And you can also receive them in your inbox when you subscribe to our weekly newsletter. Second essay is How to Ride a Roller Coaster. Discussions from the PICU, Mushki Neprastik, age 22, Brooklyn, New York. 3 months ago, I thought I knew how to ride a roller coaster. Now I realize I'm only learning. It's a lesson my almost 3-month-old daughter, Shayna, in critical condition since birth, has taught me by virtue of being and fighting. Medical staff, family, friends, strangers, and fellow PICU parents alike have joined me on a roller coaster that I now call life. I now realize there are many roller coaster riders. There are many a roller coaster rider out there. From a Chassidic outlook, would be of immense benefit, as it has been for me. And goes on to go, the difference can be described in 3 interconnected components. Doing our part spiritually, the difference meaning the difference in approach between discussion with the staff and fellow parents here at the PICU. Doing our part spiritually. Number 2, doing our part physically. It's not all about us. Trust is the 3rd. And goes on in a very, very powerful way. Step 1, step 2, and step 3. Just through the lens of our personal experiences, makes it far, hits the ball out of the park, basically. Very well done. Thank you for sharing that. Again, a great contribution to the entire Chassidic applications of our times. And finally, essay number 3, The Power of a Chassidic Melody. Levi Goldstein, age 40, Postville, Iowa. OU Mashgiach for the state of Iowa. We will address an issue which many people across the wide spectrum face not having an enthusiasm and enjoyment when engaging in spiritual and godly matters. This issue can be solved with something that is not so known, a Chassidic song. This essay is based on two concepts in Chassidus. One, a song touches the deepest part of one's soul. Two, a song is a tool for one to reach the highest degree of self-nullification to God. And goes on, contemporary issue about our challenges to enjoy what we're doing. Chassidic sources using a beautiful sikh from Tavshin Gimel, Pesach, about nigun and song, and goes on to explain it also from Teres Chaim and other beautiful places. Ideas, beautiful ideas of what Chassidus says about nigun, and then applying it to our personal lives. It's short and sweet, but to the point, with good bullets. Another excellent essay, another excellent contribution to the cause, and I believe that these will help people, really help you, help me, help people all over to live their lives in the most meaningful way and most powerful way. So with that, we conclude this week's episode of My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 255. I want to wish everyone a very end of Chodesh Adar Marben B'Simcha, and go immediately Mismach Gula Legula, from one Gula to the Gula of Nissan, Rosh Chodesh Nissan. That should be a Gula Dika week and a Gula Dika month. Gula Hamitis Vashlema, final conclusion of the long marathon that we've all been waiting for. And our yogati, even a little effort, Ezbuktana, even a small finger, can tip the scale, as the Rebbe says, and we should have the Gula Amitis Vashlema and be reunited with the Rebbe and with the Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka, whose birthday is tonight, Mazoli Gever, and with all the Rabbeim and all the Chassidim and all the souls, all the generations. Everyone be blessed, and until next week, every Sunday, we're 8 to 9 p.m., a guten Chodesh and a guten Tamid.